You are the first. I will introduce you. Just take a seat.
Thank you, sir.
Right. Delegates, let's proceed. I'm Professor Treina van Niekerk. I'm a member of CUT. I'm the head of the Department of Government Management. Let's proceed. Session 1. The title of Session 1 is Evolving Labour Market Dynamics and Stimulating Sustainable Economic Growth. There's one variable available in the titles, if you look at the program, of all three presenters, and that is the word unemployment. Our Honourable President mentioned the other night on national television that except for our major challenge that is harming our economy, and that is the lack of electricity and load shedding, unemployment, which is, by the way, one of the highest unemployment rates globally, is a serious challenge, and in particular in the Free State Province. On that note, I'm going to introduce the first presenter, and to make sure that we are productive. At CUT, we are, in fact, extremely productive. We know how to manage time effectively. So bear with me to make up for the lost time so that we will not sit here tonight 12 o'clock. Each presenter will only have 20 minutes to present, and we will allow only between 7 to 12 minutes for the questions or comments afterwards. Seeing that we have now the graveyard session, can I request all the delegates to try to attentively listen to the presenters' papers, make some notes or comments so that you can actively participate. Seeing that I'm a professor, maybe I will ask some questions to the delegates sitting here, so that just to ensure that you are paying attention. Right, let's proceed then. It's my privilege and really a honor to introduce the first presenter, and that is Dr. M. Mogundu. He's from UKZN, and let me say a few words about him. He's a postdoctoral research fellow, as I said, from UKZN, and that is particular in economics, and he's a research assistant at the UKZN Macroeconomics Research Unit. He's also, and this is very interesting, a research fellow at the Conrad University Center for Economic Policy and Development Research in Nigeria. He's also an associate member at Leiden University, specifically at the university's African Studies Center in Leiden in Netherlands. His research interests span international and developmental economics, with a particular emphasis on China's economic activities in Africa and the applications of econometrics in Africa growth and developmental issues. The title of his paper, Youth and Employment, as I mentioned, it's a serious challenge, particularly in our own province. Youth unemployment and educational attainment in South Africa, and application of Bayesian vector autoregressive model with the Minnesota prior. My apologies if I did not pronounce any of the words 100% correctly, because I'm from Bloemfontein, the central region of Bloemfontein. Let me introduce Dr. Mogundu. You're welcome. Give him a hand. You know what to do? You have 20 minutes.
It's fine, Prof. That's okay.
Are you fine? Do you have some water? Can I bring you some water?
No, I think I'll be fine.
Okay.
I think I'll be fine, Prof. Thank you. So next is which one? This is it. That's next. This is next. Right. Prof, thank you so much for a wonderful introduction. I'll go straight to my presentation, which is focusing on youth unemployment and education attainment in South Africa. And this is just an outline to give you a direction what my presentation entails. But most of the things you get it, the breakdown of the content, you get it as I present. I'll introduce my paper, then I'll give some trends when it comes to educational attainment in South Africa, and also what the data can tell us, the objectives of the study, theoretical underpinning, then the findings. So, youth unemployment, it's been persistently high, with lower youth ages between 15 to 24 years being the most vulnerable in the labor market. But what is so surprising is that youth unemployment is rising during the period where educational attainment in South Africa is deemed to be also increasing. So if we can go back to literature, what is happening in the context of South Africa, it contradicts with what literature says. Because literature tells us, based on the human capital theory, that there should be an inverse relationship between educational attainment and unemployment. So as somebody gets more educated, he or she is becoming more competitive in the labor market, which comes to conclude, or we can make a hypothetical assumption that somebody can hedge the risk of unemployment by increasing education. So there are some studies that have been conducted in the context of South Africa to validate this hypothesis. The study number one, according to my slide, which was conducted in 2007, it proved that this hypothesis does apply in the context of South Africa, in such a manner that tertiary education hedged against unemployment risk in South Africa from 1995 to 2003, and the payoff benefits increased over time. Another study that was conducted in 2016 also validated the human capital hypothesis. The authors of these studies, they separated graduates degree holders, or in the context of South Africa, we say NQF level 7 and above, right? From other tertiary education qualifications. And what they found out is that between the period of 2000 to 2013, tertiary education hedged against unemployment risk in South Africa. But there is something that they emphasized. The study emphasized the importance of tertiary education quality and the level in the unemployment tertiary education attainment nexus. So we have one point to note: the quality of tertiary education and also the level of quality education. There is only one study that I found which contradicted the human capital theory, which was conducted recently in 2018. But after analyzing that study, I found out that there was a sampling bias, sort of. So that study can hardly be generalized at the national context, because what the authors did, they went to the rural setup. They picked up the graduates at the rural setup and come up with the results that there is a positive relationship between unemployment and educational attainment. There's another study that was conducted in America in 2008, which found out that adequate funding in tertiary education reduces unemployment, and the benefits are more pronounced to the youth. So, having analyzed these studies, we came up with the question in the context of South Africa to say a natural issue that needs to be addressed or to be perused or to be investigated is whether the supply of youth with tertiary education qualification in the labor market is increasing faster than demand. That's the one side of it. Or youths are reluctant to pursue tertiary education, resulting in an accumulation of youth without higher education qualifications in the labor market. So this is the question, this is the issue that the study seeks to address. So now I'll move to show the trends of the educational attainment in South Africa. What we found out is that in as much as education attainment in South Africa is increasing, a look on the OECD educational statistics, specifically in the South African context, it shows that the educational attainment is biased towards upper secondary education. Upper secondary education, that's should be grade 10 to 12, or FET qualifications. In 2008, for instance, more than half of the South Africans' working age population had upper secondary qualifications as their highest educational qualifications, relative to 7% of tertiary education. Then upper youths is the age between 25 and 34, made up 77% of that population, while tertiary education graduates within the upper youth age group made up only 6%. So based on these statistics, we can see that tertiary education in South Africa is not prevalent, is not widespread. So we can actually start to make some assumptions of what could be the major contributing factor of youth unemployment in South Africa. So I quoted this from the OECD in 2009, and it reads, youth South Africans with upper secondary education are over twice as likely to be neither in employment nor in education or training than those with tertiary education. This is a recent analysis that was done by, OECD. And looking at the figures of the funding, education funding, we find that more government budget towards education is going to basic education than tertiary education. I made some example of the statistics in the 2019-2020 budget, where only 1.1% of the 6.2% government funding share of gross domestic product on education was allocated to tertiary education, and the rest went to basic education. Right. We also looked at the quarterly labor force survey data to see the absorption capacity of the tertiary graduates. What we found out, the graph in blue there, which is less than 10% from the first quarter of 2008 to the first quarter of 2009. It's a ratio of unemployed tertiary education graduates as to the total youth labor force. So you can see that the absorption capacity of tertiary education graduates is still high. Those that are employed, those that are unemployed, youth population which is not unemployed with tertiary education, they are still relatively low. If I may to be specific, less than 10%. So the objective of the study based on this background is to trace the shock of educational attainment to youth unemployment. And we also aim to focus youth unemployment in South Africa to inform progress on the NDP goal of reducing unemployment to less than 6% by 2030. As I highlighted in my introduction, my theoretical is underpinned in the human capital theory, which perceive educated graduates as productive, so which gives them high chances of being absorbed in the labor market. And in terms of the empirical strategy, we adopted the Bayesian VAR, which counteract the econometric weaknesses of the ordinary VAR, and with the use of the Minnesota priori, which help us to counteract the short-term period that we have in analyzing educational attainment and youth unemployment. So the equations that are relevant for this study is equation number 3 up to equation number 6. The equation number 3, it's a structural equation that traces the relationship between upper youth unemployment and secondary education attainment. The second one is lower youth and secondary education. The models that matter most for this presentation, it's equation number 3 up to equation number 6. Equation number 3, it explains the relationship between upper youth unemployment and secondary education attainment. In all these specifications, we control for inflation because it has been one of the fundamental factors which has been increasing during the period, the study period. Then in model number 4 is lower youth unemployment and secondary education while controlling for inflation. Model number 5, upper youth unemployment and tertiary education. Model number 6, lower youth unemployment and tertiary education. So we provide the descriptive statistic of each variable that was implemented. What can be derived from these statistics is that secondary education attainment has been higher than tertiary education attainment across all youth age groups, lower and upper. Furthermore, comparing the two age groups in terms of unemployment and educational attainment, it reveals that lower youths are more vulnerable in the labor market despite having relatively high education attainment, both secondary and tertiary. So I'll be fast on these graphs because I provided a summary of what it entails. But the first one, it explains the response of upper youth unemployment to secondary education, and it corresponds to equation number 3. This one, it corresponds to equation number 4, equation number 5, equation number 6. Then this one, it corresponds to how youth unemployment respond to inflation shock, which is quite interesting before I go on to summarize the education part. So Fig 3 and 6 that I have just perused through show that the response of youth unemployment, both lower and upper, to an inflation shock is consistent across all the specifications. An inflation shock sharply reduces youth unemployment by approximately 0.3% in the first period, in the first 2 quarters. After period 1, the unemployment rate gradually rises. However, the negative impact on youth unemployment is evident beyond 12th period, that's about 3 years. Then 7th, the period for lower youth unemployment and secondary education, and the 10th period for tertiary education attainment. What these results entails generally, if we can read them along with the inflation series, is that the decisive impact of an expansionary policy, which is an increase in the inflation, on youth unemployment is transitory, is short-lived, less than 2 quarters, and is subject to an inflation threshold rate of 54.7%. Assuming no wage puzzles, inflation above 54.4% can worsen youth unemployment, though the long-term negative effects are observed above 80%. And this is so worrying because when we did our focus, we find that inflation will keep on rising up to approximately 150% in the first quarter of 2025. Similarly, upper and lower youth unemployment rates are expected to rise further, reaching 60% and slightly more than 75% respectively in the fourth quarter of 2025. Although secondary education attainment among upper youth is expected to fall slightly to around 95% in the third quarter of 2022, The trend shows that it will rise back to 97.1% in the fourth quarter of 2025. As a result, secondary education attainment among the upper youth age group is unlikely to change significantly until the fourth quarter of 2025. Whereas tertiary education attainment among the upper youth age group is expected to rise to 50%, which is a good thing, 4.5% higher than it was in the first quarter of 2022. Secondary and tertiary education attainment among the lower youth labor force is expected to rise further, reaching 250% and in the first quarter of 2025. Right, the summary of the findings. Remember, the main aim was to analyze the shocks of educational attainment to youth unemployment, and we divided these shocks to secondary and tertiary education. We find that the deleterious impact of tertiary education attainment shock on upper youth unemployment is transitory, is only 2.5 years, and it's less severe. After 2.5 years, tertiary education attainment significantly reduces upper youth unemployment. So this is expected because it is not in a competitive labor market, especially in the emerging economies like South Africa. You can't expect somebody to graduate with a degree for 0.4%. Any increase of inflation beyond this threshold is very harmful to youth unemployment, and the impact is severe. According to our findings, it seems as if the human capital theory of hedging unemployment risk by increasing the level of educational attainment is still held in the South African context, with the highly educated graduates having the best labor market prospects. Then in terms of policy recommendations, support for formal tertiary education in terms of funding, in terms of relevancy, and also in terms of quality is necessary to curb youth unemployment. Thank you so much. And apologies for this, it was beyond my control. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Doctor. You showed that you can manage a very stressful situation while you're standing on the stage. and there's load shedding. The way that you manage it, thank you for that. Very professional. We will ask questions afterwards. Now, not to waste time, I want to introduce the second speaker. His title is also about unemployment, the variable unemployment. We will come to that. But let me introduce the second speaker. For some of you from the Free State, is well known. It's Dr. Omoshoro Jones. He's the Acting Director, Economic Analysis Directorate, and Senior Econometrician at the Free State Province Treasury. He obtained a lot of qualifications. He obtained a PhD in economics from the University of Johannesburg, and he holds both an MCom and a honors degree in financial economics and investment management from the University of the Free State, and a BCom also from the University of the Western Cape. He published some of his research in accredited international journals, which is really complementary. And now I can also see why he is a member of Provincial Treasury. On that note, I want to introduce him. And Doctor, you're welcome. And the title of his presentation is Asymmetry in Oken's Law Revisited. New evidence of the clinical unemployment cyclical output trade-off in the Free State Province using the NRDL model. On that note, it is his turn to start his presentation. Thank you. I hope that you will be able to see your presentation just now.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay. Do you need water? You welcome.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Is it clicking?
No, I'm going to use
switch
mine.
yours.
Yeah.
Can you just plug this on then?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. After listening to Dr. Mogundu, I know it's a graveyard moment. I will try as much as possible not to mess with your medulla oblongata, all right? Now, basically, what we are looking at here is that what is the relationship between, when we talk about cyclical unemployment and cyclical output growth, is in a simple term, the economy goes through what we call business cycle. And theoretically, as the economy is changing, the number of people being employed or being unemployed changes over time. But then we focus on the Free State Province. Now, the model we are using is nonlinear asymmetry, nonlinear autoregressive distributed lag model. And I'm not going to bore you, just to move ahead. All right. I need this systems here. I need. All right. The outline of my presentation, I will skip most of them because some of them we've discussed since morning. It's just to show you, that we follow a logical flow in the presentation that is being loaded. Yeah. So now, when we go to introduction, I'm not going to bother you. Since 1994, high unemployment rate has become what we call a prevalent issue in South Africa. In fact, it's become a nightmare for policymakers, both in the government and in the private sector. So since 1994, we've been experiencing a very high level of unemployment rate. And our growth rate at the same time has not been that what we call a productive growth to reduce unemployment. Now, it becomes a challenge because to a normal mind, to a normal sense, when you have an increase in economic growth, you expect economic activity to improve, you expect people, the labor supply or the labor demand to be higher, and people to get employed. But In the situation of South Africa, it becomes very weird why that is the case. And when you look from 1994, we've have a raft of policy, pro-growth policy to reduce unemployment. 6 of them, for God's sake. But none of them has worked. I mean, if you quickly go through it, you will find we have our first RDP of 1994. That doesn't work. We change it with GEAR 4 years later. GEAR doesn't work. We decided, okay, this time around we are going to use as GISA 2004. That too doesn't work. No improvement in economic growth. No decrease in unemployment rate. We said, okay, we are going to focus on GIFSA 2007. That too doesn't work. We now decided, okay, it is now NGP. NGP is going to do the trick, man. But unfortunately, NGP too did not do the trick. Then we decided, we are changing our mind. 2014, it is now NDP. Now, this is the main thing. Now, NDP, we have realized is not working. Our president is so being creative, putting Operation Clasella. So the question is, despite all this fancy policy, why are they not making headroad on unemployment rate and decreasing, or making headroad on unemployment and increasing economic growth at the same time? It begins to boggle your mind. We kept on changing, but nothing is happening. Now, in fact, if you look at it, between 1994 and 2009, on average, unemployment across all the provinces has remained above 24%, which is insane compared to other advanced economies, without no notable decrease. And when we look at, GDP growth, on average, when you look at the rate GDP growth, it has been actually 2% from 1994 to 2019. The question is, there must be something wrong somewhere. And like what my previous presenter said, youth unemployment has actually outpaced now adult unemployment. And the youth are the future of the tomorrow. So we are actually sitting on, a powder, what I can say, we are sitting on a gunpowder with matches in our hands. Because if the future of tomorrow does not have a place to become employed, they will become restless. Social protests, we get into things, and we know how this thing goes on. So if we look at it, youth unemployment as such, all the way to from 41% in 2019, it has reached 41% in 2019. Since 2014, when we look at youth unemployment in 2014, on average, we have 35.9%, with adult unemployment being 19% by 2019, when we look at statistics, essay. Now, with that one, I just want to show you this paragraph. Now, you can have, if you look at this diagram, you will see that Free State relationship between economic growth and unemployment rate actually tracks that of national. And I don't need to rehash it, it has been said before. But then, when you look at this graph carefully, you will see 3 different types of phase there. You will see a phase whereby economic growth is increasing and unemployment rate is increasing, which is insane. That is counter. It's not supposed to happen. But then you will see a second phase, and that we got from Asgisa, whereby you see a modicum of success where you have unemployment decreasing because employment growth was increasing. But now, since 2005, it has become a serious issue whereby you have, at the same time, a rising unemployment rate and a lower economic growth. Now, if we want to look at this, we look at it from the statistical point. If we want to look at theoretical underpinning this, we go to Okun's law. Now, what does Okun say? Okun says that, look, if you have a 1% increase in real GDP growth, unemployment has to decrease by 2%. And this foundation has been vastly, perused, researched all over the world. And that empirical regularity still holds. But the question is, that is not the case of South Africa. So what is it that is happening that we cannot see? Now, the inability for economic activity to reduce unemployment rate at both national and provincial level creates a conundrum for policymakers. Number one, how will they formulate and implement effective growth macroeconomic policy? We've went through 6 already, crash course. None of them is working. So the question is, how can we now formulate an effective, pro-growth macroeconomic policy? Number 2, how can we determine the optimal growth that we need, that we actually reduce unemployment rate? Then number 3, policymaker, we ask you, the question is, how can we achieve a sustainable and inclusive economic growth? Now with that, the motivation for this research, actually, people have used all manner of, statistical analysis, econometric model, all right, to look at the relationship between cyclical unemployment rate and cyclical output. Now, the question is, but however, what actually spurred this research particularly? There was a research by Cavase and Piri in 2020. Now, it went all the way to provincial level, they use the same model, but they find that Okun's law does not actually hold for Free State, whereas they find Okun's law hold for Gauteng and KZN. It's expected as an economic law. But the question is, why does it not hold for Free State, wherever in some cases they fight a short-run reaction? Now, when you look at that paper carefully, you will be very careful to take their findings, because 1, they did not account for structural shocks. What does that mean? COVID-19 is a structural shock. So you cannot create a model without you taking the impact of that kind of shock into place. Then when you look at it again, they did not decompose the unemployment and growth series using another, we call it, they did not use another cyclical decomposing technique. So they only focus on one. So what do we do to improve this model? We use 2D trending models. We use Aldrich Prescott's model, filtering technique to extract, cyclical series out of the normal series. Then we use Kobe-Olaris as well. So we are using 2 filtering techniques. Then again, what do? We build 4 different non-linear autoregressive distributed model. Now, why do we build 4? 2 of them, we look at the impact. The other 2, we call it for sensitivity analysis model. In other words, if we replace the series, for an example, in one model you have a GDP as a series. Now, if we replace that series with, let's say, GDP per capita, are we still going to get the same result? Now, econometrically, they will tell you, if you can get the same result using different series, then it means your model is robust and your finding is credible. So we took that chance on the Free State province. Now, on theoretical, I'm not going to waste your time on that. I have explained it's based on the Okun's law. Now, you might not wonder, when economy, I'm talking about cyclical, unemployment and cyclical output. For an example, when we talk about hysteresis, what are we talking about? There is a situation whereby when you experience economic growth, the number of people that are going to be employed is not going to be equal to the number of people that are going to be fired when the economy goes through recession. You will never find a balance. It's either you have more people fired when the economy goes to recession, or you have less people, employed when economies go, when you have economic growth. So that can create a friction relationship between the two. Then when you have that, policy formulation, people, when you look at the original model of Okun's law, is a bivariate model. It only assumes what we call a linear relationship, symmetrical relationship. In other words, if unemployment reduces, there must actually be increase in growth. But then of recent, scientists have discovered that no, this thing must actually be asymmetrical. In other words, not linear. Why? Because when you now have a model where you base it on linearity assumption, there's a possibility that your findings will not be suitable for policy formulation. And there's a possibility whereby the forecasting error of that model, it is possible that you can have a forecasting error of that model or model misspecification. So for this research, we assume a non-linear distributed lag model. Now, I will just go through it. There are papers, you can go and visit this paper. It's been a published working paper. The paper is there. You can have a look at it. But then, what is the methodology? This is just to show you the empirical methodology. Now, how do we specify our model? It's a simple bivariate model, which we start with. You have a relationship between cyclical unemployment and cyclical output. You will see cyclical unemployment where I'm standing is on my left, and cyclical output is on my right. Then we have, all the other whiteness in it. Then what do we do when we look at NARDL model? Why do we use this model? First, this model is very complicated, but at the same time it solves many problems. One, you can actually identify causality between variables, both in the long run and in the short run, which you don't have with other model. Then again, this model can decompose your cyclical series to show you to the partial positive form and negative form of both variables at the same time, which you can use for forecasting model, to make a forecast. That's another thing about the model. And this model, normally econometrician we want to test for presence of unit truth. Or if you use, ARDL model, you don't need to pre-test for unit truth. You can just run it, but to take precaution, we still went through the unit truth. We use the Zvolt Andrew unit truth test, we use KPSS test, and we use ADF-GLS unit truth test. You will find the result in the paper. Bottom line is that our series is stationary, and we can go into the model. Going into the model, I'm not going to bore you with the mathematical part of the model. I will just skip immediately to what do we find. The data, I'm not going to bore you with that. This is the extraction, cyclical extraction. You will see on my left, you will see that of Aldrich Prescott, between the relationship between cyclical output and unemployment. Then on my right, you will see that of Kobe or Laris. You will find that both of them are quite similar. And this tells me that, look, we can go ahead with our modeling, with our model. Now, first thing, what do we find? In contradicting to that of Cavase and Piri in 2020, first we find out there's a long-run relationship between cyclical unemployment and cyclical output. What does that mean? I normally say marriage for life. In other words, unemployment and output growth, they are married. In the long run, there will always be a relationship among them. Although they might be girlfriend and boyfriend and they depart, they will still come back together. So our co-integration shows there's a long-run relationship. Then, when we look at the long run, when we look at the partial, how can I say this not to make it complicated? When we look at the partial sum, all right, of the long-run coefficient, we find that it is statistically significant. In fact, it ranges between both filtering technique between 0.87 and 0.72. In other words, what does this finding mean? It means that unemployment is only responsive to positive change in cyclical output. Now, I want you to mark that. For Free State Province, for you to have a situation whereby unemployment will reduce, you must have a sustainable, long-run sustainable increase in economic growth. That is what this is saying. Then again, we find it that when we look at the long-run coefficient, we find it is significant, and it makes sense. What does this tell us? We find that the negative partial sum between unemployment and economic growth is insignificant, but however, it aligns with other empirical studies, empirical findings. What does this mean? This research suggests that a positive correlation between unemployment and output growth exists, which we can see from the graph that I showed you. There was a period where unemployment growth was increasing and output growth was increasing, which contradicts Okun's law. The same thing is found in Piri, in papers as well, and the paper by Marikov and Gledewins. So this is just to show you the co-integration. For those that are interested in the statistics stuff, you can go through it. I'm not going to bore you with that. But then again, when we look at our evidence, we find evidence for asymmetric relationship, long-run asymmetric relationship. In other words, the relationship between unemployment rate and economic growth in Free State Province is not linear. So if any policymaker is making inference or making policy decision based on symmetrical model, linear model, of course it is not going to work. So what does that tell me? So when we look at GEA, when we look at ASGIZA, when we look at NDP, NGP, it means the assumption behind those policy formation has been symmetrical. But then this is a new reality for policymakers that, look, this thing is not straightforward. It is asymmetric. It is non-linear relationship. So then again, we find the evidence for short-run symmetry, asymmetry in our model. I'm not going to bore you with that, but quickly to go to findings. Then again, the same result that we find in our baseline model, where we use the GDP, the decomposed series of the GDP. We built another two models where we use GDP capita, and we extract the cyclical, series out of that. And they give the same result as the original model, which shows that our model is robust. Now, again, this here is just to show you the co-integration results, just to show you the sensitivity analysis. All of them are the same. But quickly, what does our result say? First, we prove that what the existing research by Cavase and Piri, the reason why they did not get the relationship between economic growth and unemployment, the cyclical series, because one, they did not account for structural shocks. In our model, we account for structural shock by using dummy variables, and those dummy variables were actually statistically significant. And what does that mean for Free State Province? It means that external shocks, an example would be COVID-19. It's not only going to affect the national level, it will filter down to the provincial level. That is how we capture the shock. So what does our research shows? Evidence that we find aligns with those in the empirical literature. Then again, we find evidence of asymmetry both in the long run and in the short run, like I have said. And we find evidence that supports Okun's law compared to Piri and Cavazzi. Now, what must government do? Governments must not follow one road approach anymore. They must not follow what I call both demand intervention and supply side intervention. So on the policy recommendation, number one, macroeconomic policy for Free State should follow a multi-pronged approach that takes into consideration growth rates and unemployment based on the supply side and the demand side. First, what are the supply side, policy intervention that the government can take? One, they have to reduce the size of the government. Why is that? Because if you look at the QLFS report, the quarterly labor market report, you will find that 80% of the job that is created in the Free State is from the public sector. But please give me a break. Government is not supposed to produce jobs. They're supposed to produce, a conducive environment for jobs to be created by the private sector. Theoretically and empirically, the private sector drives economic growth. So, government already is crowding out the private sector if they have large employment in that area. Number two, government has to incentivize the private sector to reduce labor market rigidities. In other words, governments must begin to help private sector in Free State to begin to generate employment by training low-skilled employees. Number three, unemployment is mostly structural in nature from our finding, that is as a result of skill mismatch. Now, this requires the Free State government to provide financial support only or partially to encourage self-employment. You can't get the bread anymore. The gravy train is gone. Self-employment is the route to go if we want to deal with unemployment in the Free State. Then again, development of business plan, business proposal and establishment of SMMEs. I'm talking to distiller here. They must begin to support self-employment. That is how we can able to tackle successfully unemployment growth in Free State. Then again, government must actually encourage growth of informal sector. Which will surprise you that informal sector actually contributes 40% to the GDP. So when government begin to look into that sector, it goes to township economy, you will see the dynamic change in the Free State growth and unemployment will be reduced. All right? Now, the demand side policy intervention. One, government must increase public investment on infrastructure. It is very, very vital. If we want to have, theoretically, total productivity we have to improve. So government, if you look at the investment, public investment on infrastructure of government is actually very low. So government must become capital intensive to finance, infrastructure development. That will generate growth, that will generate economic growth. Then again, government must begin to continue. Free State government must begin to continue to massify flagship public employment programs like EPWP, CWP. I always argue, when you look at the data on unemployment, 80% is actually from obsolete skills, people that are not skilled. You will discover that the economy, the labor market has actually changed. It has become highly skilled, intensive labor market. If you don't have education, there is no way you can get a job. Even if you have a master's degree, you have to stand by the robots looking for a job. So in that case, now what does that mean? If government prioritizes CPWP, you don't need to have a matric. If government prioritizes CWP, you don't need to have a matric, to get a transitory employment. So it is very imperative for those two to become effective. They are labor-intensive projects, and government must pursue it proactively. Then again, if we revitalize our agricultural sector, you don't need a matric to be a farmer. If you revitalize the mining, you don't need a matric to be, to be in the mining sector. So these are the loopholes that government must begin to fill. Then finally, government must begin to monitor the public employment program. I have a econometric paper on this. I discovered that the EPWP, actually, you're supposed to spend 2 years, to be trained, for them to give you skill like an artisan to build the road, to cut the grasses, then you can create your own job. But you know what? People can stay up to 10 years because of political connection. And now when someone that's supposed to stay 2 years, Prof, is staying 5 years, it means you have denied other 5 people of their chances. All right, so government must begin to proactively monitor their public employment program. And that is one thing we discovered. Then, finally, government need to revitalize weakened productive sector like mining, agri, and manufacturing. I've already said that. Then again, government must implement prudent financial management. In other words, reduce wasteful expenditure and improve collection of own revenue in order to generate, buffer. When National Treasury decided not to give us, full allocation, we can generate our own revenue to run provincial prioritized projects. Then finally, government actually have to deepen their triple Ps, public-private partnership. Government can have the funding, but it doesn't have the skill. So you have to bring the private ear into the game so that you can increase private employment growth, so that they can pass out the knowledge, and so that we can grow as a province. And with this, I say thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for your thought-provoking presentation. He emphasized a lot that the Free State can do regarding policies. Thank you for that. Right. The next speaker that I will introduce is Mr. Themba Guma. He's the Director of Stats South Africa. And he's a real mathematician and a statistician, and the qualifications that he obtained is a BTech at CUT, a BCom Honours Business Management at the University of the Free State, a postgraduate qualification in Maths at Rhodes University. He also obtained a BSc in Maths and Statistics at Mogundu, and he obtained a BSc Honours, also in Stats, at the University of the Free State, and then he obtained an MSc in Stats at the University of the Free State, and a Master of Science, MSc in Stats. He is currently, as I said, the Director of Statistical Support and Informatics at Stats SA, and he presented a couple of papers at colloquiums and symposiums. On that note, I will introduce him. The title of his paper is Modeling and Forecasting Unemployment in the Free State Province, AR1, AM, and Box-Jenkins approach. The floor is yours, Mr. Guma. You're welcome.
You have it there.
Oh, you have a clicker. Another pointer.
There what?
A pointer. Kokadim.
No, I don't have it there. Right. For changing. Okay, let me first thank the organizers, the Provincial Treasury, Dr. OJ, and Mr. Lebon and the team, the entire team of the Free State Provincial Treasury, of course, under the leadership of MEC Brown, as well as HOD Memas Chava. And I've looked around, and I don't know where is Memas Chava there. I think I'm the only person who has actually known her for the longest in this room. Yeah. So let me just get straight into my presentation. Where do I? Yeah, as you can see, that that's the topic that I'm going to present here. And for the purposes of the introduction, of course, you know, just to put a context to it, that we have, for the longest of time in this country, have been experiencing a problem of unemployment. In fact, if we were to characterize the challenges of this country, there are three, as you know, and unemployment is one of them. And in terms of the National Development Plan as well, You know the targets that were set for 2020, 14%. I think we could not reach that target already. Hopefully we still have an opportunity for 2030, which has been set at 6%. So the idea really with this paper, it's in recognition. Of course, I've worked with the planners in the province, that one of the gaps in our planning systems is the whole idea of looking, ahead, forecasting, knowing, so that at least you can actually, plan a little bit much more better. You can see if maybe there are changes that needs to be done, the interventions that needs to be put in place for you to be able to achieve what you have to do. So that's essentially what is really behind this. And of course, the model that I'm going to use, or that I've used in this paper, it's ARIMA. I will explain why the bracket there, the I in bracket there shortly. But in short, the model is based on two expressions, two polynomial expressions. The first part, the auto-regressive part, which is really the variable, regressing on its legs. And the second part of the MA, the moving average, it's really, building or modeling the errors, trying to find the best linear combination of the residuals of the errors that will actually enable you to produce some kind of code. So it does happen that you can actually use only one part of it, or both of them, hence we'll have an ARMA. And the I there, as I indicated, it actually represents or it's called the integrated. But essentially it means some transformation that needs to be performed depending on the data that you have. So let me explain before I go to, because there's a foundational assumption to it, which is stationarity. There is what you call, maybe I need to explain the two things here, the generating process, what is called the stochastic process, and the time series itself. You see what you're seeing on the numbers on the time series, those are the numbers, but what we are interested in is the process that generated those numbers, the stochastic process that underlines that particular time series. So that's what we're interested in. It could be the what you call in statistics language, probability distribution function. So in terms of this assumption that has to be adhered to the stationarity assumption, that we say that the mean and the variance have to be constant. In other words, we look at that PDF, the probability distribution function. So we look at whether that assumption, so that the variance and the mean as well as the covariance are really in somehow constant. So it's very important that we ensure that it happens. But however, not always that the data will always be stationary. Fortunately, in econometrics, we do have the what you call the tools that we employ to actually transform such a data into stationarity status. So one of those tools which I've actually employed in my paper is what is called the differencing. Of course, there's another one, logarithmic, method. Those are the two popular methods that are actually used. As I explained, once you transform, now your ARMA changes to become an ARIMA because of that particular process that you will have undertaken. Now, as one develops this model, there are a few things that one does. First, identification part. There's a tool that we use, the correlogram. It's actually a graph that plots what we call the ACF, or the autocorrelation function, as well as the partial autocorrelation function. Now we look at the pattern of spikes or the pattern of legs in that particular, corologram. And the pattern usually directs us in terms of, because somehow you have to start guessing first what could be the possible, model that you, so it gives us sort of like a way of starting to say, from the patterns here, this could be an AR model, or this could be an MA model, or it could be, something close to that. So we look at that kind of a pattern. So in my paper, you'll see it takes the shape there that it takes is what you call the geometric decay after the first leg. And it becomes even more pronounced or even more clearer on the partial autocorrelation part, which for me will give me an indication that it could be an MA. Of course, on the ACF side, it does show that decay, but not as clear as on the PACF part. So, yeah, so that's the part. And the second part, it's on the estimation process that needs to be performed, that one has to actually look at. So one of the critical things there is looking at the significance of the coefficients, because they have to be statistically significant. So, and of course, what we mean by that, we look at the p values. That must be, if we use the significance level of 5%, for example, you'll expect, to have the p values that are less than that. And then one of the critical things as well is to look at the parsimony concept as well as the fitting process on the fit part. Because what normally happens is that if you introduce a lot of variable in your model, it improves the fit. But the downside of it is that it does have impact on the forecast quality. So you have to find a balance of some sort, what you call a trade-off between the two. Hence, we're talking about the parsimonious model. We get the few variables that will be significant, which will have as such, at least we are able to get that kind of a balance. And the last part is the diagnosis that you have to perform in the model. And this will include, critically, the issues relating to the residuals, because they're very important in modeling. You want to minimize the errors as far as you can. So one of the things is what we call the serial correlation or the autocorrelation, that your model should not have serial correlation or no autocorrelation. What is also referred, in other words, you want to achieve what is also known as the white noise. Don't ask me why it's called the white noise. Perhaps maybe the doctors will know. So that's the thing. And the second part is what you call the heteroscedasticity or the homoscedasticity that you have to also look at. In other words, is what you call the variance of the size of the variance, which has to somehow be constant, or maybe the variance of your errors that must actually be constant. And one other critical thing is the ARMA characteristic polynomial, which must actually, the roots of it must actually lie outside the circle. And of course, the inverse means that they have to lie inside the circle. And one last thing is the consideration of the structural break, what the doctor here was referring to as a structural shock. Because big events, remember in 2008, there was this financial crisis, and you see the tendencies in most of the, the time series data, that there's a sort of like a dip that you see, even though in South Africa, the effect was not really as compared to the, many parts of the world. And of course, the other event recently, the COVID-19, of course, that one shows almost, I think it's almost in many parts of the world, including us here. If you look at the data, time series data on the unemployment, for example, it will show you that kind of a dip, that the structure of it. So you can't build a model without really looking at that and also incorporating it in your building process. So that's, in short, what the whole approach was about. So lastly, yeah, the forecasting. So the last part, I must also explain here, the data ranges from, on the quarterly labor force survey, from 2008 Q1 up to recently the second quarter of 2022. However, I've used the data up to the second quarter of 2020, reason being the approach of what we normally refer to as a within the sample estimation. In other words, you leave certain data, elements. In this particular case, data on quarter 3 and quarter 4, and including those that are actually in 2021. So you leave it out, build your model, and then you test yourself, because that's information that is already been published. So you can be able to test the robustness of your model based on such. So I could have opted for using all data up to 2020. So I just only left out those few so that I can be able to test if indeed the model works better. It really, is able to estimate properly. And then, of course, the, what you call the forecast, evaluation of errors. As I say, errors are very, very important in this instance. So we use the bias, the root mean square errors, and several of those that I've actually indicated there. And of course, how they are calculated, there are two things or ways that I've actually presented in my paper: the expanding window strategy as well as the rolling window strategy. The difference really is how it's done, how the whole process. But it's always also important that to present both cases, which I did in this particular case. And the horizon that I've opted for, it's a 4-year horizon. Just to give an idea in terms of how far or what the employment or unemployment will be. And looking at the results, first, just plotting, just looking at the graph, the visual check, which is also very important because it gives you a sense of what, especially on the possibility of the stationarity or non-stationarity. The graph there on the left-hand side is purely the unemployment rate for the Free State. And you can see that when you run the test, 4 of them that are presented in my paper, because it's always not wise to present only one test for stationarity. Even 2 might not necessarily be sufficient because they may produce conflicting results. But at least if you have 4, in this particular instance that are known in literature, at least you give you a sort of a sense of confidence to say, indeed, whether you have obtained non-stationarity result here or not. Because in some cases, it's not a really clear-cut situation that the time series might not necessarily be stationary or otherwise. So applying, looking at those tests, the 3 of them, they produce of course, the null hypothesis there of the presence of the unit root. And if you look at the p-values that I've obtained there, which are in agreement, not really rejecting the null hypothesis there, to say that indeed what you have there is a non-stationary situation. I presented the 3 here, but in my paper there are actually 4. The PP, both the ADF augmented Dickey-Fuller the PP, Philip Perron's, as well as the KPSS. They all largely in agreement, except with the KPSS, but only at the 1%. If you look at the critical value there, in fact, yeah, the significant level, in fact, of 1%. That's where, if you look at the test statistics there, that's the only situation which is really not really a worry. But in general, there's an agreement that this time series is indeed non-stationary. And as I indicated, the method applied differencing, and you can see on your right-hand side there in blue, the immediate change, how the impact of the differencing method there. And in terms of the model, identification, as I indicated there, Colloquium, and the patterns there tells, you can see as I indicated, once we have the decay or the geometric decay after first leg, then you are likely to have either the MA1 or the ARA1, or the combination of the two. Clearly from the partial correlation plot, you can see it's almost a clear case for MA, but on the ACF side, slight doubt that the AR1, but it's something that we can, had to go for. And of course, I've also indicated the issue of the structural break, which we test with the Chow test. And it also, it actually confirms the break there in Q2 of 2020. And how do we address that? I've introduced the dummy variable in the equation, where you create a series basically with zeros everywhere and 1 at where the break is. And you can see the impact of actually, presented the two situations where you have the model without the dum, or the dummy variable, and where the dummy variable is. Immediately you can see there, if you look at those two situations, that first you see the coefficients are not, look at the ARMA terms there, the AR and the AMA terms, as well as, in fact, it's only the AMA term that is actually significant there. But the constant, as well as the AR terms, are not significant. So it shows you, it just shows you that. And one of the things there that you also can look at is that R squared value there, which presents about 19% there of the role of those variables in the model equation. But when you introduce the dummy variable in your equation, the model improves significantly. If you look at the coefficients there, they are all significant, highly significant. Especially the MA there with all the zeros. So, but they are all highly significant, which is satisfactory, which is okay, what you are looking for. And you can also see the R squared there as well, moved to 60%. That's actually represent really the predictive power of those variables in that particular model. And then the other important thing there, you can see also with the Darwin-Watson stats. That's the stats that also used for testing the autocorrelations or the single correlation there. And the expectation is that if it's 2, then it means there's no autocorrelation. And that's exactly what we approximately got there. Which is 2, which we are fine. So I presented these two situations so that you can see how the model has actually the impact of the dealing with the structural break is in your model. The other situation also, because looking at the residual, the behavior of the residual in onto is very, very critical as well. Gives you a sense that those two thresholds there, those two lines that are appearing there, that your residual, which is in blue there in the graph, the bigger part or the bigger portion of it must actually lie within those two thresholds. Then we can at least feel a little bit much more better that we have done well with the model. And the autocorrelation check, that the correlogram, we can see we look at it because there the null hypothesis is the null hypothesis there is that there's no autocorrelation. And if we look at the Q statistics there that are presented, all of them there actually agree. They don't reject that particular null hypothesis there. And of course, like I presented now, looking at the fit and the residual, almost the same kind of idea with the homoscedasticity. We look at the testing also with the because we test it with the residuals of squared. So it also confirms, because the null hypothesis there is that it's homoscedasticity. I always struggle to pronounce that. So the violation of that, of course, it will be the heteroscedasticity that, deposit. But that correlogram also proves that indeed we do have the homoscedasticity. We don't have heteroscedasticity there. So which we are happy thus far. The other thing also that is also critical is also to check the stability condition of your model. And we test it with the root. Look at the root of the ARMA characteristic equation, which of course must lie, as I indicated to you, the root must actually be outside, but the inverse must actually means it must be within. So if you look at that, the MA, I think it's approximately around 0.9, which is actually within. And the AR is also within, which is 0.57. So we are happy with that. This, softwares like your eViews and they will have, some kind of short, way of doing it. So sometimes it's important to check yourself against what they will propose to you. What is called the automatic model selection. If you look at what the selection is in terms of it even ranks them, choose 20 models and say the best will be this one, the second one will be this one, and the third one will be this one. And if we look at that, that automatic model selection actually agrees with my choice, which I'm happy with that. So it ranks it as number one in that whole, out of 20 that were chosen. So ultimately, the model that I went to is, I've indicated there, I'm not going to bother you with that, down there at the corner there. Now, in terms of the forecasting, I've used the fan chart. The advantage of the fan chart is that you are able to present, different bands. Maybe in this case, I've went with the 3 bands of 30%, 60%, and 90%. In other words, the values that I'm giving, I'm saying they will, with the 30% confidence, they will be within, these, values. For example, in 2022 Q4, with the 30% band, I'm saying they will be between 31.8 up to 34.3. It is going to run between there. And and so on and so on. So it goes, but at the end, the mean value is around 33%. what the model actually gives, the forecasting, results that are coming out there. And yeah, and as I indicated, that graph there on the two, just to check what is already known and reported for between 2020 quarter 3 up to 2022 quarter 2, just to check how good the model is. And you can see the differences between what the model is, forecasting versus what has already happened. So I'm pretty fine with the results. The differences there are actually very, very, small. And in terms of the errors there, our expectation is that all those errors, the bias, the MSEs, and et cetera, of course, as the horizon increases, the errors will also somewhat also increase, because you are able to forecast much more better with close to, and that's the situation that we have there. But in general, if you look at them, they are all, small. They are not really, that big, which makes me happy with the situation. So that's the end of my presentation. So in short, what I'm trying to say here is to say, the planners, let's look at this kind of information and review if indeed what we're doing in terms of fighting unemployment, whether indeed, because if we're likely to be keeping on doing the same things, we are not likely to get the results that we may be looking for, especially meeting the targets of National Development Plan, as well as meeting the results of the targets of Sustainable Development Goals. So that's the long and the short of my story, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this presentation, which showed to us, and I think some of us, our maths and inferential statistical information is a little bit rusted. And by attentively listening to him, I also take note of the free test, inferential stats test that he applied, and how one can use a mathematical modeling to forecast the unemployment rate in the Free State province. Thank you for that. Well done. Very professional. On this note, and due to time constraints, I'm going to allow the delegates to make to ask two questions that you have to the presenters. And after that, I will ask Professor Rambe, my colleague from the University of the Free State, to come forward so that we can immediately proceed, and the four presenters can also prepare themselves to come to the stage when we're through with the comments or the questions. So I'm handing over now to the delegates. Any questions or any comments I will allow. Please bear with me. We are far behind with the time. I'm going to allow the two hands there. You're welcome. I saw also a hand there at the back. That's it. Not more than that. Otherwise, colleagues, we will be here until 10 o'clock tonight. Right, the first hand, you're welcome. Your question or your comment, is it to a specific person?
I have a question that's related to two presentations on unemployment. So I'd like to thank the presenters firstly for their presentation. With regards to the presentation from, I think, Dr. Mogundu, he mentioned that with the study that they did, that when they were doing the study, it did show that unemployment and education attainment was related. But what he also mentioned is that so one of his recommendations was to invest in tertiary education. So, but my concern there is that when you look at our education system, only about less than 40% of learners that register for grade R actually reach matric, and about less than 30% actually go to university.
Tertiary education.
Yes, to tertiary education. So you're talking about 10% of a population, really. So my question is, do we really want to invest more in that education, or do we want to focus on the basic education quality perspective of it? And then I wanted to link it now to Professor Jones's presentation, where he mentioned that in fact, his recommendations about looking at low skills, which I really support, because that's where a lot of youth are. Because they don't have higher education, that means they don't have low skills. But the problem that I have is the recommendation to look at sectors like mining, agriculture, where I'm seeing actually growth, a decline. I mean, there's a decline in those sectors. So I'm just thinking, shouldn't we rather be looking at recommendations to government to say which are the SMMEs that we could really focus on? Because what we want the youth to create their own employment. We want to drive SMMEs, and I think once we do that, we'll be able to create jobs, because I don't see us creating jobs in sectors that are already failing. So I just want them then to talk about these things interchangeably. Thanks.
Thank you. Are you okay? Right? Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that the captains in the industry, they appreciate the fact that tertiary education is not widespread. So what we are saying is that from grade 1 up to grade 9, up to matric, there is a lot of people who are attaining that, and that is what I was explaining. One of the main reasons is that basic education is mandatory according to the Constitution of South Africa. And that's why most of the funding goes to basic education. One of the recommendations that I put in the study is that it is of paramount importance to preach the relevance of tertiary education, because it does curb unemployment. So, relevance in terms of quality, relevance in terms of support funding. So when it comes to quality, yes, quality should be enhanced right from the basic up to tertiary. But the major finding that our study put forth, especially as a policy recommendation, is that tertiary education can help curb unemployment in South Africa, and the higher the better. People should not just end with bachelors, they should also increase to honors, masters, PhD. The higher you go, the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you covered? Welcome.
Thank you very much, Prof. Actually, one thing I think I did not say is that from our asymmetric model, it shows that 1.8% increase in the real GDP growth will actually lower unemployment for Free State by 1% now. I have a professor that always said economists are not to be trusted. They are on one hand and on the other hand. You have to be in between. Now, if you look at the recommendation that I give, I said both supply side and demand side intervention. On the supply side, I listed them because this is based on the results of the model, of the asymmetric model. Because now you are not having a linear relationship. You are having a non-linear. What does that mean? Asymmetric relationship between cyclical unemployment and cyclical, output. So what does that mean? We cannot have inclusive growth if we focus on one side. Of course, like I said, it is good that government should support self-employment. That will help Free State Province. But at the same time, 80%, and I'm repeating myself again, of when you look at the pool of the unemployment data is coming from obsolete skills. Now, where can those skills go to? The market has become highly skilled intensive, according to the doctor here from his research. So the question, I don't have a skill, what must I do? That is what I said. If you look at the mining and agric, I just mentioned them, they have high multiplier effect. In fact, I had the research where I used a computable general equilibrium model to find out for Free State manufacturing sector have at least high fiscal multiplier effect in the Free State province. So that has to, I'm talking to the government that, look, you cannot say because mining is dead, agric is dead. I mean, Prof, Bloemfontein used to be the basket of the nation, but now I don't think we're even the paper of the nation, not even basket anymore. So what am I trying to say? We have to go back to the drawing board. You want to really reduce unemployment, you want there to be dent, back to agric, go back to manufacturing, go back to mining. Remember, you must have a balanced economy. If you are creating jobs through SMME, those that does not have the funding, doesn't have the skill, what must they do? So to balance the equation, you go back to the drawing board. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much. Are you covered? One thing that I can mention, those low-skilled pupils, when they finish with secondary school, we should go back to the drawing board and focus on artisans to equip them with skills so that they can open their own businesses. Right, there was a gentleman raising his hand over there. You're welcome. Try to keep it short as possible. You're welcome. Where's the... Oh. Okay, proceed. Just clearly indicate if you ask a question to whom you raise your question or who must answer your question. You're welcome.
My name is Sadiq. I would like to start with the last presenter, the one on the presenter that used the ARIMA model. There's one few thing I would just like clarification on because yes, you use a battery of stationarity tests like the unit root, Philip Perron, KPSS. I've not seen the paper now about the presentation. And the other thing you did a Chow structural break test, and there is evidence of break in the stationary, in the series, and the break here is actually 2020 Q2. So I think if you use that type of series without accounting for stationarity in the stochastic process of the series, it might lead to a misleading result. So a better way, maybe in subsequent version, I don't know, maybe if this is a working paper, is for you to account for structural break such a way that you'll be able to know the order of stationarity in your ARIMA model. So for the second presenter, Dr. Jones, I saw in one of your slides, slide 4, is actually thought-provoking. And that phenomenon is what we call jobless growth. When a situation where economy is growing and is not really creating much jobs. And my own thinking to that is that we may want to look at, where the source of this growth is coming from. Should government at Free State be looking at diversifying this growth such a way that is able to create the much needed jobs that we need in Free State? And I also agree with what you said. Government should not have any business in business. The role of government should be to create enabling environment for businesses to strive. So, and I think that discussion has actually been overstressed in early presentation about issue of wage bill, how to cut wage bill, etc. Then I will now go to the first presenter, Dr. Mogundu. I just highlighted a few things I need clarification because I see that I think the objective of the work is to look at youth unemployment and educational attainment in South Africa, an application of Bayesian VAR. I realize that you look at inflation, so I'm just wondering how does inflation enter that mix? Okay, so I also want to know how did you measure educational attainment? Because you use secondary and tertiary measure. So I'll be interested to know, is it like average year of schooling, or what type of measure did you use in measuring educational attainment? Then my other question I would like to ask is, should we begin to look at, okay, what is the direction of causality so that governments, we can inform policy making? Which of the variables should government target first? So that's my comment, contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought it was one question. You already had 4. Who wants to go first?
Mine was
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, I accept it as a, yeah, I will look at that.
Okay. Anyone who wants to respond? Thank you, sir.
For educational attainment, quarterly labor survey data gives educational attainment, total educational attainment for secondary and tertiary of economically active labor force. So what I did, I converted secondary education attainment as a percentage of the youth labor force. I did the same for tertiary. Then when it comes to the direction of causality, there is a reverse direction in upper youth unemployment and secondary tertiary education. But from upper youth unemployment to secondary education attainment is actually more severe than the latter. So that's why I said, in as much as persistent youth unemployment can discourage educational attainment, but the government should focus on emphasizing the relevancy, the quality and support towards education. Thank you.
You want to respond? You covered.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sodiq. I think it's just a comment. You know, I've learned on how to present in academic atmosphere and the public sector fair. I mean, when you look at the presentation, I skip some parts. We talk about labor hoarding, we talk about hysteresis, we talk about, those can actually cause constraints between economic growth and unemployment. But basically, what you're saying is what provoked that research. The question is, why must both unemployment and output be trending in the same direction? It's supposed to have inverse. So the reason for that research is the question that, does open law hold or not? Then we discover it holds, but however, not from linear perspective, which policy formulation has been followed, but rather it is now non-linear, which governments need to take into consideration. Thank you, Prof.
Are we covered? Can I hand over then to my colleague, my esteemed colleague, Prof Rambe, to come to the stage, as well as the 4 presenters in the next session. And then I want to thank the presentation, the 3 colleagues for their presentation. Thank you. And for the delegates for your attention.
Afternoon, everyone. No, you're fine. Afternoon, colleagues and delegates. All right, this is the very last session, and I know people are tired, and it's going to be a difficult session, but I'm happy that we will keep it short. So 20 minutes per presentation, and we'll try and invite a few questions, and then we wrap it up. Is that fine? Thank you. All right, so we have got 4 presenters in this session. Okay, the first presenter, Professor Marace from the UFS, and then Mr. Moyo from NCPT, Ms. Nokwazi from the University of from the University of Zululand, and Mr. Mklungwane from HSRC. So can the presenters please come forward? Oh, everyone is here. Okay. All right. So let me start with the first one. Let me introduce the first presenter. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce to you Prof Marace. He's a professor of development studies at the Center for Development Support at the University of the Free State. He's also an honorary professor at Sustainable Mineral Institute, the University of Queensland, Australia. He serves on editorial boards of Habitat International and the special chief co-editor of the City in the Global South session of the journal, Frontiers in Sustainable Cities. Okay, his research interests include housing policy, small cities and towns, and public health, focusing on children. In addition to concentrating on these themes separately, he focuses on integrating them. Prof Marace has authored, co-authored, and compiled more than 250 research reports, including 180 articles. So he's a well-accomplished scholar, you can see. In peer-reviewed journals or books, he has also co-edited 9 books and is the author of 1 scholarly book. Over the past 10 years, he has been a collaborator, principal investigator, or a co-principal investigator for research grants of approximately 20 million. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and my privilege to introduce to you Professor Marace. The floor is yours.
Okay, while they're trying to set up the presentation, so first of all, I've got a commitment at 5:30, so I'm not going to be here for questions. It's strategically planned like that, so but if there are questions, please, you can just, with the organizers, they've got my email, and I'm happy to answer them by email or by phone. All right, colleagues, so what I'm going to try to do is to try and keep to the 20 minutes. Can you wave to me somewhere at about 17, 18 minutes that I just keep to it? All right. So the research is about a township economy in Ramaglotsi, in Viljoenskroon. So often when we think about the informal economy, or we think about township economies, we think about these people there on the side. We think about them as not being entrepreneurial. We also think if they want to be entrepreneurial, they need to get formalized. And that's the sort of thinking. However, at the national level, there's about 3 million people work in the informal sector. Or more than 3 million people work in the informal sector in South Africa, and 2 million in informal enterprises. 1 out of 6 who work in the informal sector, or 1 out of 6 people that work in South Africa actually works in the informal sector. Nationally, about 20% of informal enterprises have paid employees. So if you take that, 1.2 million people are paid employees of what we call the informal sector. Now, that is twice the number of people working in the mining industry. Okay? However, we always see these people as sort of illegal, not entrepreneurs, etc. And that's sort of the background of the work we've done in Ramaglotsi. So what we did there was, one, we did a land use survey. We went from site to site and we documented land use. There was a household survey of about, I think, 250 households. Then we surveyed and actually did a census of all informal businesses in Ramaglotsi. 215 of them, I'll show you that in a moment. And we had 2 groups of entrepreneurs, sort of what we call survivalists, the smaller guys, and then the bigger people. And we're busy with some in-depth interviews to understand a little bit better. All right, so we made this distinction between survivalists and more substantive enterprises. And you were a substantive enterprise if you had a physical structure, you had a business name, and you had paid employees. All the others we then booked as emerging or survivalist enterprises. 250, 67 in the substantive group, and 148 in the survivalist group. All right. So who are these people? 31% in groceries and spaza shops. Cooked food, 10%. These are of the 67. On the right-hand side, you can look at the full number. I'm just looking at the red ones for the moment. Liquor sales, 12%. Hair care, 9%. And mechanical and other repairs, 3%. We were also very interested in trying to understand, trying to identify artisans. We didn't pick them up in the survey with businesses. We did pick it up in the households, and we think there is something there that we need to take further. Now, I've got 9 main findings and some recommendations. So main finding 1 is that if we looked at this total income and expenditure, and it's a little bit different between income and expenditure, but there's every month 40 million rand coming into that economy of people staying there, receive 40 million, they spend more or less 40 million, rough estimates for the moment, and about 25%, between 10 and 12 million of that originates from social grants. Okay, so 40 million rand a month is not a small, it's not insignificant in the bigger scheme of things. The second main finding is we found substantial evidence of what we call entrepreneurial spirit. Why do I say this? So although there's some reference to I need to survive, to provide for my family, I was unhappy with the other job, there's also lots of evidence of I want to be my own boss. Okay, it was a dream. I saw an opportunity. I enjoy taking risks. All elements of entrepreneurs, and I think we need to value these people for being entrepreneurs. They also had goals for the future. All right? It was not just surviving now. They thought about increasing turnover, growing, able to create more jobs, getting better and larger premises. So it's not just a survivalist person that is looking for something to feed the family. There's a bit of vision. There's entrepreneurial spirit. The third main finding is enterprises are growth orientated and have employees. Okay? So if you were survivalist, you would just think about yourself. Okay? These people are thinking about growth. I've already referred to that, and they have employees. So nearly 100% of the substantive enterprises said that they want to employ more people if the business can grow. There's that also that next need, next level of thinking. Total number of employees. The 67 substantive enterprises had 159 employees. Okay? So more than 2 employees per business. This is actually higher than some of the figures at a national level. So this is fairly important. They are providing jobs. You can say, okay, show me that they're paying the minimum wage. I'll tell you they don't pay the minimum wage. Okay? But there are people that are working that have got some kind of salary to take home, very informally, etc. It's not unimportant in the bigger scheme of things. What are the main problems? 4 issues. Premises, and with premises it goes with electricity, water, sanitation, whatever. Okay, so premises is a big issue for these people that often in locations and in premises that aren't great. They're asking for skilled workers. Okay, in Ramatlotsi, an entrepreneur saying, I can employ people if they're just a little bit more skilled. They do see, despite this 40 million, they do see a bit of a problem around the size of the economy. So if we only think about Ramatlotsi, as the township in Viljoenskroon, it's got its limits. So 40 million is the limit. It's not bigger than that, okay? And these people see that they need to get economies of scale, they might need to move out, okay? And the fourth main problem is crime, which is a common problem for businesses in general. Fifth main finding, business size varies, okay? So what you can see there is it varies about bottom third that have got turnover of less than 10,000 a month, and then there are the top 7 that report above 20,000 rand and even as much as 70,000 and 4 million a month, if that was correct in the process. In fact, the point is, the moral of the story is there are few enterprises that are making big money within that economy. There are varied business management practices. Okay, so the people are aware of competition. Okay, they know that they need to be price sensitive. They advertise. They source their suppliers. Now, the big thing here is that they source largely from enterprises in Viljoenskroon, but also about 40% from Potchefstroom. And they largely supply to local businesses. The problem is, outside, they don't have an ability to make that market bigger. It's very difficult to move outside of Ramaglotsi. So in Ramaglotsi, within that 40 million, they're doing well. The challenge is, can some of them actually move out? Financial record keeping is limited. So this is nationally, the work that's been done nationally shows that once a person can make a distinction between my business and my household, the money for the business and the household, once you make that distinction, you make substantial progress in terms of your business. Generally, this is an area where one needs to intervene a little bit more accurately with enterprises. 20% said they've got no record keeping. This is of the 67 substantive enterprises. Keep money in the business separate. 31% said no. That's a bit of a problem. And no accounting skills. About half said they've had no accounting skills. The other issue is the spatial distribution of these enterprises. Now, what we've done, you can't see that, can you? No, so it's next one, sorry. That's what we call a heat map. It shows you where they're located. And I can't show you the exact places. But the point is, if one can understand the spatial pattern of where people are, can we maneuver the traffic? Can we maneuver the street planning? Can we maneuver the infrastructure in ways that support a small corridor in a very simple way that provides feet to people in a very directed way? I think that's important. The last main finding is the importance of local artisans. I've spoken about this very early. So they are the typical person that does house repairs. Okay, I do it for 10 people down there. The drain is blocked, the roof, there's a problem with the roof, etc. The fridge has broken. Okay, and these people make money, and they keep them alive. And we found, I think, if I'm not correct, about 200 of them in Ramaglotsi. And they survive on doing those household services, adding a room, whatever, in the process. All right, colleagues, a couple of recommendations. So the first one is, when you think about these, there's no fixed way of dealing with it. Okay, there's not provide people with fridges or provide them with stock. Or rather, we all need to do a bigger effort to understand these enterprises and their managers. And think about it as small little steps we take over time. So premises is an issue. The danger is that we think we know they want X, Y, and Z. Okay? Some people need a bit more formal enterprises. Other people need modular premises. They can fold it up, take it away, put it up tomorrow at a different place. We need to understand these things. It's not as if there's a fixed answer that we can put down. We need to understand these things better. There's a level of people in manufacturing and construction and maintenance in this economy and in many economies in our townships where we can make some inroads in understanding them and supporting them. Because nobody else, unlike checkers can go in Ramaglotsi and put down a retail outlet, but you can't do a checkers for house repairs. Skills is an issue, management training is an issue, and then a warning, although there's some room for formalization, we need to be very careful to think that the outcome is automatically formalization, and be careful to jump that gun too quickly. I think it needs to be taken serious, okay? There are challenges to design, funding, and successful implementation of policies at this level, and we need to think more in terms of process than think in terms of pre-designed answers. Chairperson, thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. I think you did well on time. You left a couple of minutes, so we are fine on time. Thank you so much for a thought-provoking presentation, Prof. I would have invited questions now, but because of our time, I would call the next presenter and then we'll reserve the questions for the last segment. Okay, the next presenter, so if you've got any questions, just put them down. We'll have our next presentation, and then once we finish, we can entertain a couple of questions. Okay, the next presenter is Mr. C. Moyo from NCPT. The presentation is titled A Strategy for the Participation of Small, Medium and Micro Enterprises in the Renewable Energy Industry. Okay, let me read the brief bio. Okay, Mr. C. Moyo, is it Kabanga? Yes, Mr. Kabanga Moyo is a sector analyst in the Trade and Sector Development Program at the Northern Cape Department of Economic Development and Tourism. Before joining the Northern Cape Department, he worked in the Budget Office of the Eastern Cape Provincial Treasury. Kabanga holds an MCom Economics from the University of the Western Cape, postgraduate certificate in Economics Development and Policy from the University of the Witwatersrand, and a BCom honors in banking from the National University of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present to you Mr. Kabanga Moyo. The floor is yours.
How do you operate the thing?
He's here to assist.
Okay, to assist. How do I move this later?
This is forward, back.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm going to present to you. Pardon? Pardon? Oh, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to present to you a strategy for SME participation in the renewable energy industry. Okay, this is the outline of the presentation. As a way of introduction and background, there has been an increase in the uptake of renewable energy in South Africa, mostly because of the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Program. More than 6 gigawatts of renewable energy at a total investment of 209 billion has been procured from about 112 IPPs in 7 bid windows within the first decade of the REP program, and more than 50% of those are located in Northern Cape. However, the REP program has had a minimum impact in terms of inclusion of SMEs into the core value chain of the renewable energy sector. SMEs often, come in to provide simple services like cleaning and security for the IPP project. However, alongside the REP, there has been recently a growth in the small-scale embedded generation, that is encouraged by mainly insecurity of supply from the power utility. And also, the coming in of the banking sector into renewable energy in terms of providing some innovative financial products, as well as that the price of the technologies for renewable energy are declining. So that has encouraged this small-scale generation within households, industrial sites, and business premises. Given this background, the Northern Cape, hosted a Provincial Renewable Energy Conference. And in that conference, one of the key resolutions was that the inclusion of SMMEs in the renewable energy industry must be prioritized in the province. And the Department of Economic Development was seen to be a key role player to actually execute that resolution. So that's how this work on the strategy was born. In terms of this problem statement, as I already said, the SME participating in the renewable energy industry is very limited, But if you read the literature on SMMEs, you find that SMMEs take a very key role in terms of the economic development of a country. Within South Africa, some estimates say that SMMEs constitute the majority of formal businesses and provide between 50 and 60% of formal employment and contribute substantially to the GDP of the country. And the main platform for participation in the renewable energy in the country is the REP program. And as I've mentioned, SMME participation is limited there due to numerous challenges, the key of which are the limited financial resources and the lack of technical and managerial capabilities to actually participate in that industry. Okay, the research that has been done, it's new research and it's also limited, mainly coming from the CSIR. It has indicated that there are opportunities for SMME participation in renewable energy in the renewable energy industry, particularly in the small-scale generation market. But there are challenges, that need to be circumvented to allow the SMMEs to participate. Against this background, with the focus on the Northern Cape province, this study proposes a set of interventions to circumvent the challenges that are identified in these field studies to allow or unlock opportunities for SMME participation. In terms of the study approach, we followed a very simple methodology or method that involved a desktop review of available strategic documents, policy documents, policy pronouncements coming from government, industry, literature, as well as academic literature, particularly field studies that were done at CSIR. With those reviews of literature, we managed to map out the value chain of the SSG market, as well as understanding the challenges and opportunities for SMMEs. We also used that to identify the relevant stakeholders that formed part of the second leg of the method, which is the dialogue forums, where we actually consulted with the key stakeholders within the renewable energy industry to actually try and see how the challenges that are identified in the literature can be circumvented, and in a way try to formulate some interventions that can see the participation of SMMEs in this new small-scale generation market. Okay, the small-scale generation market is part of the broad renewable energy services market. It's called a renewable energy service market because the firms that operate in that particular market or industry are involved in the installation, operation, and maintenance of small-scale renewable energy generation systems rather than manufacturing of the components. So the SSG market is further decomposed into the generation part, and also the energy storage part. The generation part is dominated by the rooftop solar PVs, even though some technologies can also be used, but the PV systems are becoming common because they are much cheaper and they are much easier to install, and there is ease of scalability of that particular technology. The other defining feature of the SSG is that it is small, in the sense that the facility is less than 1 megawatt, and it is installed at the point of consumption. It is distributed generation, opposed to the centralized generation that is conventional with the public utility. It is a growing sector. The projection is that by 2035, a total capacity of 7.5 gigawatt will be installed, as part of this SSG small-scale generation, valued at about 75 billion rand. Okay, in terms of opportunities that are identified in the literature, the opportunities for SMMEs are in distribution, installation, operation, and maintenance of the rooftop solar PV systems, rather than in manufacturing. Manufacturing capacity does not exist in the country. The bigger companies that are in this market, they actually import the components from China and Germany and assemble them locally for installation. So for SMMEs, the opportunity is installation, either as a main contractor or under an established company. Also, operation and maintenance of the system once it is installed. The challenges that has been identified mainly centers around capacity. The type of SMMEs that we've got, they don't have the capital, to actually participate in this market, because it is also capital intensive. They need to buy the equipment, which is quite expensive. Also, in terms of capabilities, technical capabilities, in terms of actually doing the actual installation. Further to that, after making the installation, the installer is required to also provide guarantees and warranties, to the installation. And those things, they actually increase or escalate the cost of entry into this particular industry. There is also a limited regulatory framework, given that it's a new industry that is coming up. Regulations and regulatory framework is still being developed within the municipalities. Also, there is installations that have actually taken place in the market by unqualified installers, and that has actually affected the confidence, consumer confidence within the market. So those are some of the challenges that are identified. Given the challenges, this study served to propose some interventions for SMME participation. Those interventions were the outcome of the policy dialogue with the relevant stakeholders. Okay, we had dialogues with the industry experts, some companies that are already operating, established companies. We had dialogue with industry association, particularly the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association. We had dialogue with financial institutions that are actually funding some of the companies that are involved in this installation. And the Northern Cape Department of Economic Development and Tourism is well positioned to coordinate this intervention that we are proposing for two reasons. First, the department has the SMME sector as one of the priority sectors. And further to that, the renewable energy industry has also been identified as a priority sector. So because of those two reasons, it is well positioned to actually coordinate this intervention. The intervention targets two types of renewable energy SMMEs at different stages of development. We have got aspiring entrepreneurs with viable business plans. and entrepreneurs with trading businesses but facing growth and sustainability challenges. As I have already mentioned, the main opportunity or the low-hanging fruit in this industry for SMMEs is installation, operation and maintenance of rooftop solar PV systems. But as we mentioned earlier, there are challenges that need to be circumvented to actually make way for SMME participation. And the challenges that are identified, they call for a multi-stakeholder approach to resolve, which involves municipalities, industry associations, government departments, and companies that are already operating in the space. The intervention that we came up with after the dialogue with the stakeholders is made up of 5 mutually supportive items. The first one is to support specialized training of emerging and aspiring SMMEs. That one is already underway. We made a call for SMMEs that are in the renewable energy sector to apply to so that they can be involved in a training program, that is certified by the industry, so that they can be qualified to actually do the installations. The training is currently underway. And then the second item in the intervention is to create an incentive fund and support package to stimulate entrepreneurship. That fund will be coordinated from the department, and it is expected to be supplemented by donor funding and other incentives from national government that are targeted towards SMMEs. And thirdly, we are going to establish and formalize partnership with industry stakeholders. Already we have partnered with one of the established companies that will take the role of a mentor to these upcoming entrepreneurs. And we also facilitated access to government buildings as an initial market. So what happened is that we brought the Provincial Department of Public Works to actually allow, the public buildings to be the first, market for these aspiring SMMEs to start, learning and building capabilities by installing these rooftop solar systems on government buildings. In terms of the intervention model, we are going to promote incubators. Already there is an incubator that has been established, the Northern Cape Renewable Energy Incubator, where these SMMEs are going to be incubated. We are also going to facilitate, promote mentoring and coaching, wherein we identified established companies to actually mentor these upcoming entrepreneurs. In terms of key stakeholders, some of them I've already mentioned. We've got the provincial department, the main department being the Department of Economic Development and Tourism, in terms of formulating the strategy and implementation. The Department of Public Works, in terms of availing the public buildings for installation. Other departments will work with the Department of Economic Development through the government cluster system to actually promote this intervention. Other stakeholders include financial institutions, which some of them that we are expecting to talk to them in the future in terms of seeing how they can actually fund this intervention. Because already commercial banks have got tailor-made financial products that target this particular industry. Sabia has also come on board in terms of providing the green card training, for these aspiring SMMEs. And then the local government, which is the Salt Lake municipality, is the one that actually drafted the SSG policy for the local municipality. And they are also on board in assisting the prospective entrepreneurs understand the processes of applying to the municipality to actually conduct the installations in government buildings. As a conclusion, the renewable energy sector is very difficult for SMMEs to participate. There is a high cost requirement, and also it requires complex capabilities. However, the small-scale embedded generation market seems to be a platform that could be viable for SMME participation to build skills, industry confidence through collaboration with medium-sized and larger companies. However, collaboration among the role players in the value chain is very key to realize the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Moyo. You did well on time. You still had 5 more minutes. I was just trying to signal that you are left with 5 minutes, and I think you were rushing. But you did well on time. Thank you so much. Colleagues and delegates, we still have 2 more presentations. The next one is Ms. Nokwazi. The title of the presentation is The Infusion of Entrepreneurship and Innovation in the Curriculum at Institutions of Higher Learning in Developing Responsive Curriculum. The short bio for Ms. Nokwazi. Ms. Nokwazi Mtembu is currently appointed as a contract lecturer in the Department of History at the University of Zululand. She's enrolled for a PhD in History at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Ms. Nokwazi Mtembu is an economic and social historian. She has contributed to economic and trade workshops within the University of Zululand. She is an opinion columnist for the university, for the Zululand Observer newspaper. Furthermore, her research interests are in bilateral trade flows of BRIC countries, trade relations between China, India, Africa, human trafficking in Africa, indigenous knowledge systems, historiography of South Africa, and economic history. Her qualifications are in BA, BA honors, and a master's from the University of Zululand. Thank you. Ms. Nokwazi Mtembu, the floor is yours.
Can they hear me? Okay, greetings everyone. So the title of my study is The Infusion of Entrepreneurship and Innovation in the Curriculum at Institutions of Higher Learning and Developing a Responsive Curriculum. So one of the reasons why I went for this study is because as an academic, I was having a conversation with other academics, to say there's a silent threat that we are aware of as academics, that the students that we are teaching, will be, yes, of course, we'll be happy they will graduate, but then one of the saddest things is that they're also going to join the pool of unemployed graduates. So one of the study was trying to, or is still trying to find, is how do we use entrepreneurship and innovation to help, and foster sort of young people that are capable, of starting their own businesses, who will not rely only on their degrees, so that they will be able to start their own businesses and be innovative, because one of the other things is that young people are innovative. Young people have ideas. It's just that they do not have support that is going to initiate or implement those businesses ideas. So in my introduction, I say that unemployment among the youth continues to be a burden. It is a reality in South Africa, irrespective of education attainment. It affects almost everyone, in particular the youth. Institutions of higher learning have to start and prioritize infusing entrepreneurship skills and innovation into the curriculum. Hence, I did say that not only should we, not only should higher institutions of learning, only provide the degrees, but when a student gets out of their university environment, at least they should be equipped with more than a degree. They should be equipped with how to start a business, how to be a better citizen who's not only going to have a mentality that says, I'm out of university, so now I'm looking for it, but how do I, create job opportunities? Even though the graduate unemployment rate remains relatively low in South Africa compared to those of other educational levels, unemployment is still a pandemic in our country. Hence, there is an urgent need for the curriculum to address potent issues concerning the development of the economy and be in alignment with the industry stakeholders in addressing the economic decline and unemployment. Because one of the other things that are happening, you find that there's a mismatch between what the university curriculum provides the student and what the employer or the stakeholder wants in the sector. The unemployment rate among the young graduates aged 15 and 24, this is information from the Stats SA, declined from 40% to 3% to 32.6%, while it increased by 6.9 percentage points to 22.4% for those aged 25 and 34 years. So one of the other things about these stats is that we know that at age 25, mostly the graduates at that time, are done with their degrees. So now there is this competition of where am I going to get the job? So it is very much, the infusion of the curriculum and the infusion of entrepreneurship and curriculum, the infusion of innovation and entrepreneurship, speaks to this, that even though you have that degree, but then do not sit, and wait for someone to employ you, but rather have the capacity to say, I can start something. And this is why I'm saying that the universities or the academics should be at the forefront in infusing, entrepreneurial skills and innovation into the modules or the curriculum overall. As the world shifts more and more to science and technological advancement, social and technological innovation is paramount in supporting and developing the South African economy. So what is the purpose of infusing the curriculum with entrepreneurial skills and innovation? The curriculum must go towards a trajectory that seeks to really delve and address the challenges on the ground. The primary goal of entrepreneurship is to develop entrepreneurial capacities and mindset of students, developing the entrepreneurial ability to identify and exploit opportunities. A well-designed curriculum that is responsive and transformative in nature must be able to equip students with relevant knowledge with emphasis on innovation and entrepreneurship, because what we can agree on, colleagues, is that the world is not going backwards. 4IR is amongst us. So as we are in classes and we are teaching, we also need to be cognizant that even us as academics, we have to be equipped into saying that let us understand technology, let us understand how the world is moving, towards technology advancement, so that when we are teaching our students, we are teaching them, more than just a degree skill, but the realities that are out there and waiting for them. So a well-designed curriculum is responsive and transformative in nature. It must also equip students with relevant knowledge with emphasis on innovation and entrepreneurship. It should increase the students' full capacities, enhance the quality of students' lives. Innovation in the curriculum should promote multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approaches. One of the most important things about promoting multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary is that the world is moving towards those approaches, that as disciplines, there is no discipline that can, be an island on its own. Disciplines need one another so that whatever challenges that we are facing as a country, we come together and we solve them. So that's why I'm saying that the curriculum, has to be infused with that entrepreneurship and that innovation skill so that we as discipline, different as we are, but we come together in solving this unemployment crisis because it cuts across discipline and ages. The curriculum in addressing unemployment. So the curriculum normally refers to the specialist professional or disciplinary knowledge that universities offer in a variety of combinations. The curriculum must be able to address, I think I've mentioned this because of time, let me move. The most appropriate curriculum strategies to handle youth unemployment and reduce societal crisis and poverty is the acquisition of skills to enhance human productivity, which the students in our universities or in our TVETs, it is really what they need. There is a need for curriculum to focus on personality of the youth by making curriculum practical and relevant because as I was mentioning that young people are innovative, young people need people that are going to support them and the role of higher education is solely to do that, to support the students' businesses because students are business-minded. As an academic myself, as a lecturer, I deal with such students that are very innovative. They just need that support to say that you can do it and you don't need a degree to make it in this world, but even your mind, with the right support and with the right doors, you can make it. This is the link between curriculum and employment. A practical curriculum must take into consideration entrepreneurship education, vocational and technical education. Labor market's capacity to absorb the increasing number of new entrants as well as to provide decent and productive employment opportunities is far from sufficient, and I think, colleagues, we can all agree to that. Role of entrepreneurship and innovation in the curriculum. Equipping is to equip students with necessary skills that will address the unemployment and economic matters in a responsive way outside the parameters of their degree certificates. The curriculum must be able to address, I think I've mentioned this very much, the curriculum does not cater for the current world. I say this because, and I think I've also mentioned this point, that there's a mismatch. I don't know if colleagues, you are aware that one of the reasons why we have this high unemployment graduate is because in the varsity or in the TVETs, the curriculum speaks another thing, another language, and the employer wants another thing. So the universities and the stakeholders, they should come together and be able to help, to structure a curriculum that would also address the needs of the employer and address the needs of the current world that we are living in. The world has approached the fourth industrial revolution. However, we may have to ask as institutions of higher learning, are we equipped to embrace the 4IR? How do we continue to gamble with the lives of students? One of the reasons why I say higher education, it looks like they are gambling with the lives of the students is because the reality is that our students, we will teach them, but they can't run away from the reality that the pool of unemployment is waiting for them. We are sitting here, one or two in your neighborhood or in your family as a graduate, but they are unemployed. So that's why I'm saying that sometimes you may ask yourself, should a person go to varsity or they should just have matric and then go and start a business? What is it that they should do? Because the reality is that after matric, a person, one of their first things to do, I want to go to varsity and get a degree. But then that degree doesn't speak to your employer. What good does it do for you if you're going to sit with that degree? It's a reality that we are facing. Hence, I'm saying that it looks like the higher education is gambling with the lives of the students. The infusion of entrepreneurship and innovation in higher education is a need that will address the unemployment crisis and student development capacity. The National Development Plan. So now this is a plan by our government in addressing unemployment. The plan focuses on the critical capabilities needed to transform the economy and society. It speaks to, the reasons why, as an academic, I'm pushing or I'm pro, let us infuse entrepreneurship and innovation. Because even in the National Development Plan of our country, of the government, it speaks to that, but it seems like the policy is not being implemented. Maybe if we, or the higher education, pushes this, that let us infuse this curriculum. It might not be in all modules, but gradually we can start and see and test how far can we, go and achieve what we set to achieve. Achieving these capabilities is not automatic, nor will they emerge if the country continues on its present trajectory, of which it is sidelining the youth. Rising levels of frustration and impatience suggest that time is of the essence. Failure to act will threaten democratic gains. In particular, South Africa must find ways to urgently reduce alarming levels of youth unemployment and to provide young people with broader opportunities, more than just getting a degree. But if you're at varsity, get more than a degree, be equipped with another skill that will help you to fight the unemployment, not only for you, but also for the other people. So, National Development Plan requires progress on a broad front. 3 priorities stand out: raising employment through faster economic growth, improving the quality of education, skills development, and innovation, building the capability of the state to play a developmental transformative role, of which is also the role of the higher education. A sustainable increase in employment will require a faster growing economy, but how will the economy grow faster if our youth is just not supported? The National Development Plan aims to eliminate poverty and reduce inequality by 2030. I don't want to say it's a far-fetched dream, but we're in 2022, and all of these things, small of them have been achieved, and 2030 is near, and people still remain unemployed, and the numbers are not going to go down. So this is a very famous, picture, that. So it says, to ensure a fair selection, you all get the same test, you all must climb the tree. So as an academic, as a lecturer, this is one of the, the methods that we normally use to teach students. We treat students as the same, or else they are not the same. They don't consume information the same. They don't retain information the same, and they come from different backgrounds. So we are also part of the problem, because we are the ones also that are limiting students to excel, right? You give a student, for instance, I'll make an example, that you have degrees in business management, in economics, and it doesn't say to students automatically you're going to be an entrepreneur. But somehow we should also ask ourselves that out of all the graduates that we may have from economics or business management, how many of them become entrepreneurs? And if they are not becoming entrepreneurs, what is stopping them? I know that not everyone can be an entrepreneur, but we should also ask those hard questions, that why are they not going for the entrepreneurship role? So now it's sort of a proposal to say that teaching and learning at higher institutions of learning should also, be able to address such things. So this depiction now is a depiction about theories, that we need to introduce new theories, because someone might say, it sounds nice, your idea maybe is nice, maybe we hear you, but is it possible? Maybe someone might say it's not possible. I believe that it is possible if we're going to start with understanding the importance and the different theories that are involved when teaching. So in this picture, I hope I'm not going to stay much on it. It's an elephant and it's people around it. Everyone is thinking of different things, right? The other one is touching the tail of an elephant, they're thinking of a rope. The other one is touching the foot, is thinking of a tree. So it speaks to the dynamic and the different students that we have at universities that also need different strategies and different theories so that they can excel. So now, teaching and learning and the curriculum, these are the theories that I'm talking about. They are conceptual frameworks or organized principles that describe how individuals learn and why learning happens the way it does. They provide insight on how individuals absorb, process, and retain knowledge during learning. Many factors such as a prior experience, cognitive, emotional, and environmental influences affect how understanding of views are acquired or changed and how knowledge and skills are retained. So I'll make an example. If you have a mother maybe that is a street vendor, and then you go to varsity and then you get a degree. Somehow that knowledge that you have of your mother as a street vendor, that experience, somehow it is not promoted So the reasons why I'm saying let us look at different theories, it is to say that that child that has a different background, that child that has a different environment, how do they use that experience to help themselves to say, I'm on the right path? Even though I'm at varsity, in varsity we have entrepreneurial weeks where I can be supported, where that business, I can also come back and contribute on it. But we do not do that. What we just do, we give them degrees and that's it. We need to think differently and to say that how do we speak to different students with different needs? So I'm moving fast. So what informs the study is the transformative theory. So I'm not going to stay much on it. Transformative theory happens when other positions get us to critically engage with our own, with how our point of view and frames reference differ or cohere with those of others, and to arrive at attentive best judgment regarding contested beliefs. Hereafter, it also enables one to imagine alternative responses to situations and make one better able to work with others to solve problems, which is exactly what this paper is attempting to do. So this slide, I like it very much because it is saying who's doing business with who. So it's not confusing because it's more of a recommendation, isn't to say, if we're going to infuse entrepreneurship and innovation in the curriculum, we should start and ask ourselves as into, if we're saying that universities, because many universities now are trying to infuse entrepreneurship with your entrepreneur weeks that universities they have. But you find that there's a lack in support, to say, even if students have, business ideas, but the universities doesn't go on full scale to support those ideas. I'd also make an example so that maybe it could be clear what I mean when I say who's doing business with who. You find that even now in this colloquium, you're right, if there was a small, medium business by students, maybe they were sewing or maybe they were making products. So this question of who's doing business with who, universities should do business with their students. They should support students' businesses. So stakeholders that are also part of the universities should be able to promote students' businesses. So for instance, maybe the guest speakers that were here, maybe one of their gifts, maybe when they were leaving, if we had a student business, it could have been that one of the things or the products from that business be gifted to these people so that the support can be visible and the business could also be viable. So this says that we should be cognizant as into understanding who is the university doing business with. The university is supposed to be doing business with their students who have businesses. When there is entrepreneurship week, universities, it's their opportunity to say, how do we invest back to our students so that when they get out of this environment, they're able to have strong and viable businesses that will also contribute to the GDP and the GNP of South Africa. So I will conclude, and because of time and also thank for my other colleague, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mtembu. You were on time. You were just left with 1 minute, so you did well on time. Colleagues, just be patient with us. The very last presentation, I promise, is from Mr. Hlungwani from HSRC. The title of his presentation is Sustainability of Rural Livelihoods During and post-COVID-19. So let me quickly read the bio, and then I would request Mr. Hlungwani to come to the podium. Mr. Hlungwani is a junior researcher currently appointed in the HSRC's Inclusive Economic Development Research Division. He holds an honors degree in development studies from the University of Limpopo. He is currently completing his master's degree with the University of Limpopo in development studies, and his dissertation focuses on the contribution of agricultural cooperatives towards local economic development in rural areas. Mr. Hlungwani was hired by the National Research Foundation from 2011 to 2012, placed in the investor vendor in their research office as a research administrator. He also held a position of rural development planner hired by the Belgian Technical Cooperation under Participatory Settlement and Development Support to Land Reform from November 2013 to June 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Hlungwani.
Thanks, Prof. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's been a long day. Majority of us, I think, were tired. So I'll just speak to my presentation, which will be very, very quick. The topic is the sustainability of rural livelihoods during and post COVID-19. Where do I point? Which one? This one? No. Okay. Okay, sure. So I'll be focusing on the rationale of the study, and then I'll give a little bit of introduction, literature review. I won't speak much of the methodology. The paper is available for the interest colleagues. The findings and the policy implication, and then I'll finally conclude. Why is it important? After the breakout of COVID-19, majority of us, we thought of, okay, now the issue of COVID-19 is about health, forgetting that it might not even affect our health system only, but it can even affect us beyond our health system. I was one of the people when the COVID-19 was introduced, I thought, no, this thing doesn't belong to us. It only belongs to the health system. So it's very important as researchers or as government to focus beyond the health system, because COVID-19 does not only affect the health system, so it affects even the rural economics, it even affects even the lower people on the ground. The literature, I've already spoke of that the COVID-19, the impact of COVID-19, it goes beyond the health system, meaning to understand the sustainability, how the rural people on the ground are they surviving during and the post-COVID-19, it becomes fundamental. And many people have lost their jobs. As you know, the impact that COVID-19 has imposed to our communities. So it's very important to understand how are they living now, how are they sustaining now, because many of people, they have lost their jobs. I will speak to a theoretical approach, types of rural livelihoods, the characteristics and challenges of rural livelihoods during the post-COVID-19. The theoretical approach for decades, rural livelihoods or livelihoods has been more of rural development, explaining how best rural development can be developed or how best rural areas can be developed. So the concept or the perspective around livelihoods has been going on around explaining the concept, explaining how can we better the rural economics. And the approach that is mainly used as top-down approach since from early 50s. And then the focus, it also focused on the sustainable development, the combination of environmental and social cohesions. And the types of rural livelihoods in rural areas, many of them, it's farming activities, your small-scale farming, your livestock grazing, your livestock raising, and of course other non-agricultural activities that are other non-agricultural activities, of course. And then the characteristics that we find in rural areas, most of them are farming activities. Most of the rural people are involved in farming. Therefore, it is important to understand that how those farming activities have been impacted due to the COVID-19. They've also been characterized by the part-time farming, like they're not full-time in farming activities, and they mainly use, you find that you are a household, you're the head of the household, you use your kids as, or your children as labor assistants or to assist you in farming than employing someone. So it's more of family kind of setup of practice. The challenges that has been imposed due to the COVID-19, most of rural activities or rural livelihoods, people, they couldn't able to support their rural livelihoods due to the measures that were imposed, due to the regulations that were imposed. So people, they find it so difficult to support their rural livelihoods. The other thing, the huge part of it, it's income generation. Many people, they couldn't afford to make money or to make income due to the measures that were imposed during the COVID-19. And the impact is likely to run not only during the COVID-19, but even beyond the COVID-19. Hence, it's very important for us to understand the impact of COVID-19, the sustainability of rural livelihoods beyond the COVID-19. On methodology, I won't speak much on it. It's a small case study that I've embarked on. It's, my study area, it's in the Collis Shaban local municipality that's in Limpopo. The research design, I've opted for qualitative and qualitative study, and then adopt the normative, the normative and the evaluative research design. Data collection was done through the semi-structured interview, observation, and the literature review. And then the target population, I focused on the small business that are found in rural areas and the ordinary people. I've only chose 20 participants for the study. I only choose 20 participants for the study, and I've used the purposive, like the one that I knew that I'm gonna get the information from them. That's the one that I've used, and I've used the sampling, random sampling for the study. Data was captured through SPSS and the use of Excel to modify some graphs. The participants, they were aware that this is mainly for academic purposes in terms of ethical consideration. Discussions and findings during 1991 to 1920 in America, a little attention was given to the communities after the breakout of Spanish flu pandemics. But now we have seen a change where all over the world, the communities were given more attention, different to what happened in America during the 1919. The most affected people due to COVID-19, their livelihoods at the daycare, mainly the women, that's the one that were mostly affected. The domestic workers, because they have to return home with no other income generation. They have to return home because their employers, even themselves, they were perhaps affected due to the COVID-19. So the most people that were affected are the daycare workers and the domestic workers. And this it's likely to impact for the long run. I'll keep on repeating that it's very important for us to look beyond the COVID-19. The other people that were affected is those spaza shops that are found in the villages because they couldn't qualify or they couldn't get the relief funds. Although the policy, under the policy, there is a clause that speaks to informal settlement. However, they couldn't get any assistance from the relief funds. Most of the livelihoods that are practiced in my case study, mostly of them is those spaza shops, informal business, your shoe repair, those small businesses. However, literature indicates that under Lipombo, the relief funds under the clause of informal business relief funds and spaza shops, it's only 2,690 spaza shops or small businesses that got assistance, that got the relief funds, that got assistance, meaning the majority of other, big the province as it is, meaning the majority of informal businesses, they couldn't get any assistance from relief funds. The sources of income since the discovery of COVID-19, it indicates that there's been an increase in dependency of social grant, meaning many people they were not working or they couldn't work, so they have to rely on relief funds known as the 350. So many people, they've used that relief funds as their sources of income. That's the highest percentages according to the figure there. And then and the issue of increasing social grant, I've already explained that is the form of 360, and then people that were not able to generate any sources of income from their own livelihoods, the one that they usually practice, hence they also depends also on social grant as well. And then the policy implication, it is thought that the effective implementation of African Continental Free Trade Area and then African Union Productive Transformation Agenda can strengthen the rural economy or the rural livelihoods, and then sustainable implementation of the relief funds. It's needed because currently it's thought that it can cripple the fiscus. So we need to have a sustainable implementation of the relief funds to assist the most vulnerable communities or people on the ground. And then the strong monitoring of the recovery plans in each and every province is very important. As I conclude, the shock of COVID-19, it may not be a temporal, it's a long run. So we had to, as researchers, embark more on the impact or the effect of the people due to the COVID-19. I've already spoken to find a sustainable way to deal with the relief funds, because the government, it might cripple the government financial system. And then more economic policies that specifically focus on rural economy, it's recommended, it's highly recommended. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lungwane. You did well on time as well. I think you spared more than 5 minutes, which is good. Can we reserve this time for questions, especially those who really have some burning questions? We can just take 3 or 4 questions from the floor. The floor is open now. Okay, I recognize you, ma'am. Anyone else? Okay, that gentleman over there, I also recognize you. Anyone else? Okay, there's none. I have 2 questions for the presenters. Okay, so in that order, can we start with ma'am, and then that gentleman at the back, and then I'll round up with the 2 questions I have for the 2 presenters. Thank you.
Thank you to the presenters for the informative presentation. I was particularly...
We can't hear you this side. Can you just switch on the mic?
It's on?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, no, I was just interested in the presentation about bringing innovation and entrepreneurship into tertiary.
Ms. Mtembu's presentation.
Yes, Ms. Mtembu's presentation.
Yes.
Yeah, so I like that idea because, in fact, yes, we do get a lot of graduates coming out and not finding employment. But what I didn't get from your presentation is how we propose to prepare the university for that, because obviously a lot of lecturers that are currently at university are probably academics and not in an entrepreneurial space, and you probably have 1 or 2 lecturers that are in business and really focusing on that. So I'm just trying to understand then how would you kind of pilot that kind of a program, so because you would have to have this entrepreneurship program in each and every school. So that is the part that I didn't get. Thanks.
Okay, so the question is on academic entrepreneurship. Few people who are academic entrepreneurs. I hope you got the question. Yes, I got. Okay, thank you. The gentleman at the back.
Thank you very much. My question is also to the same presenter.
Okay, Ms. Mtembu, yes, go ahead.
Yes. She just mentioned that, something interesting, by the way, that, we don't need like a degree for us to make it, right? But at the back, there is this ideology that, everyone must have like a degree for them to get like a formal employment. And basically what happens is that the challenge that we have, even people that have started like some business, once they get like a formal job, basically what they do is that they quit the business that they start. The question is, how can we motivate, 1, these students, 2, those people that have started their business such that even if they find like a formal employment, they don't quit or they don't cease from continuing their own business, right? So that they can, keep on employing other people. And the other small question is, how do we basically incorporate the idea that we don't need necessarily to start the entrepreneurship in tertiary education? Because, if you start from the basic education, maybe these would have more impact compared to starting in a tertiary education. We do know that, everywhere there's a Nigerian, my friend. There's Nigerian everywhere doing business. The question is, what can we learn from Nigeria? What can we learn from Pakistan? Right? Because they're everywhere. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So let me entertain those 2 questions. Okay, then unfortunately, I also have a question for you as well. Okay, you mentioned something like this, students must start to engage or to do business with universities. Wouldn't that constitute conflict of interest, because by nature, universities are actually providers of services to students. And then if students were to start business, and now they are going to trade or to sell their products to university staff, wouldn't that constitute a conflict of interest? I hope you heard my question. Okay, and then the other one relates to, let me see, just give me 1 second. Okay, Kabanga Moyo. Yes, you mentioned the issue of incubation as one of the solutions to ensuring that startup failures can be resolved. The issue of startup failures can be resolved. But however, the reality is that as much as we normally point to incubation as a panacea to some of the challenges that small business and startups face, the reality is that small business still fail even post-incubation, okay, for various reasons. For example, studies have demonstrated that some of the startups normally have an entitlement culture, and they lack initiative, and they normally expect these business incubators to do everything for them. So those are some of the reasons, as well as the lack of skills. So even post-incubation, some of these incubatees, they still fail. So my question is, how confident are you that business incubation, especially in the context of South Africa, is an effective tool for promoting startup development? Thank you. Okay. You may respond, starting with the question from that lady and that gentleman over there, and then you get to the 2 questions I asked.
Okay, thank you for the questions. So I'm going to start with the question on how to support, I would say, academics in the university to be equipped with skills that would speak to, infusing entrepreneurship and innovation. So one of the things that is needed in addressing this is that us as academics, we need support. For me as a lecturer to tell students that it is possible, bring that idea of yours, work on it, go to NYNDA if you have to, I will support you. I myself, I have to be equipped. I can't just sell something to a student that I myself am not equipped. So I think to answer your question is, this academic staff, they themselves have to be equipped, they have to be supported, and I think it also speaks to the point that I was saying that even us as academics, one of the major things that I think we need to do more often is that research on what we teach. Because if I, as an academic or as a lecturer, I'm teaching maybe business management, I need to continuously research on that, find stakeholders that would speak to my module, so that there won't be a mismatch between what the curriculum is giving the students and what the stakeholder or the employer wants. So if I'm aware of that and I'm able to go to the stakeholder and say, this is what needs to happen, support me in this way. So thank you for that question, because I think I would also add it, so that it can be visible in my study to say then, how do, what becomes the role of lecturers, in ensuring that there's success, in infusing entrepreneurship and innovation in the curriculum. And then I'm also going to go to the second question, even though I don't want to use the word confusing, but what I understood is how do we motivate graduates? Because when I was presenting, I mentioned that you can make it without a degree. That point of you can make it without a degree is not to look down upon higher education, but it's a concern. It's a concern to say mostly, students will pass matric, and their first or their initial goal is to go to varsity. And the question is, when they arrived in that environment, to what extent does the curriculum really equip them, to be responsive citizens? How does, the curriculum transform their lives? Because it all goes back to the curriculum. So it's not said in a negative way to say education is not important or a degree is not important, but it's a concern to say, to what extent does these degrees that our students have or that they attain, do they help them? Because the sad reality is that they sit with them at home, and it's not nice. It's absolutely not nice. So I think what needs to happen is, let us be infusing entrepreneurship and innovation into the curriculum, so that even with that degree, you do not become a limited graduate or a scholar. You're able to think abroad. Your horizon as a graduate, is far much, broadened. So I think to sum your question is to say that a degree is important, but the degree should also match, the daily challenges or the inevitable changes that the world is constantly bringing upon our lives. And also, you mentioned what can we learn from Nigerians and Pakistanis. I wouldn't want to compare because my study is looking more into higher education. So the Nigerians and the Pakistanis, I as much as they are hustling, it's a different kind of hustle, that I'm pro for South African students, because mine is to say they have the viable environment of a university, right? But now they need more than just an environment. They need something that is going to push, them, so that they could also be healthy competitors, if I have to put it like that. So what can we learn from them? I think is just to continue the importance of hustling, right? I think I'm answering you. And then the last question was on the conflict of interest. Wouldn't there be a conflict of interest if the university starts doing business with the students? I absolutely believe there won't be. One of the reasons why I'm saying this is higher education, it should be a concern even for them, that there's an output of graduates, but they are all going to this, many of them can't be all, but many of them are going to this pool of unemployment. So the point of universities doing businesses, it's not to say that universities should only do business with the student, but how do they support? It is a point trying to address universities, they themselves, with their entrepreneurial weeks, they should be able to exploit those opportunities to say, out of maybe 100 students that were involved in the entrepreneurship, we picked up 5 that we can support as the institution. I even made an example that universities have colloquiums, have conferences, and you'll find that people would be gifted. It will be nice if one of those gifts, it could be said that it is a product that is made from a student maybe funded business or a student business, so that even the other student can have that motivation to say, that business that I'm sitting on, that idea that I have, if I work on it, it can be supported by the same institution that I am, studying at. So it was from that point, to say that universities, they should also do business with students, not in a way that is confusing, but in a way that is supporting towards the students' businesses or the students' ideas. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So it's more about provision of support rather than them doing direct business with students. Okay, okay, I got you. Very, very last question. Is that a question? Oh, it's a contribution. Okay, oh, please go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, mine is a contribution regarding the issue of conflict of interest, because I also support the idea that Prof is trying to raise, to say whatever the business that is happening within the tertiary education institutions, students should be tendered first, but it appears that is not the case, and I'm very sure that there is some element of legality in terms of conflict of interest that Prof is aware about it. That's why he had to pose that question. Let me say, Prof, it is actually a barrier when it comes to entrepreneurship within students in the tertiary education that needs to be addressed. It needs to be taken into deep cognizance in the policy development. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, can I just give one contribution to the question of why the Nigerians, the Pakistani, and all these other guys are doing better? Okay, a couple of studies have been conducted, especially in the small retail sector, and it has been established that one of the things that these guys do much better than us is the fact that, number one, they normally do what are called, they do market segmentation. They know their target market, that's number one. Number two, they also do what is called bulk purchasing, and they also do what is called break of bulk when they sell their products. And so bulk purchasing, they get some massive discounts from that. And then they also do breaking of bulk when they sell their products. So it's more like selling small things at a small margin of profit, but still being able to make a profit. The other thing that was also established was that they also open during inconvenient times like your public holidays, long hours. For example, they open maybe until 10 or 12 in the evening. Some of those things that normal large businesses don't do. So they exploit all those market gaps. So those are some of the strategies. And the other thing that they do, which they are really good at, which some of our local businesses don't do, is what they call bootstrapping. Okay? It's a way of actually ensuring that you benefit in a way, but minimizing your cost of conducting business. So, for example, while you could, for example, employ someone from outside, they would employ a relative. So the relative does not have to be on their payroll. In that regard, then that money can then be spinned around and be used for other purposes. So bootstrapping is one of the strategies that they actually effectively use, and literature has established that they are really good at that. So I was just trying to respond to that question. But of course, some people disagree. There are some disagreements with that. But anyway, that is what has been established in some of the sources that I've read. At this juncture, I think I need to close the session. I think we've actually run out of time, and I need to take this opportunity to thank all our presenters here, Ms. Mtembu, Mr. Hlungwane, Professor Marace in absentia, and Mr. Kabang Moyo. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to all the delegates for attending. Thank you to the Free State Provincial Government, the Treasury, and the Office of the Premier for organizing this event. We really like to applaud you for a job well done, and to CUT for hosting this summit, We are grateful for all these efforts. Thank you so much. And back to Dr. Omoshoro Jones is here. Dr. Jones, are you here? The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to say thank you very much. I cannot thank you enough. I know because of some things that happened this morning, we were able to stay up to this time. We did not intend to finish today, but thank you for your perseverance. Thank you, for your support. You staying shows that you support us. I want to thank the respected and revered Professor Rambi. Thank you very much. The session was wonderful. We appreciate you. Thank you. Please, can we give him a round of applause? And for all the presenters from all over the places, I am saying thank you very much. We enjoy your presentation. Please, can we give them a round of applause? And please, I want you to clap hard at this time for my wonderful HOD, the main program director. She did well. Can we put our hands together for her? Thank you very much, HOD. And we thank all the moderators. Mr. Mgoma, please can we put our hands for him? Thank you very much. And Professor Van Nikek as well, that she's not here. Please can we just give her a hand for a job well done. And finally, the MEC, can we put our hands together to thank our MEC? Thank you very much. And then can we now clap for ourselves for being here? Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here today, and I will be expecting again to see you tomorrow morning. We are going to start registration, the same thing like today, from 7:30 to 8:30. Then by 8:35, I can assure you tomorrow we have papers that we are going to present. It's going to be full academic tomorrow, so we will stick with time tomorrow. By 8:35, we will start with the presentation. For our scribes, I acknowledge you. Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone here, and I said, I don't know how to thank you, but I'm so very grateful in my heart. And you must just go home, you rest, you shower, you take your dinner, and wait for the show tomorrow. Thank you so much, and I declare the session for today closed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof.